Hello. Welcome everyone to this event of extraordinary women, extraordinary entrepreneurs hosted by Empower Africa. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Shai Bernstein. I'm VP of Biz Development and Partnerships at Empower Africa. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, just a quick summer in Empower Africa. Empower Africa is a business community with a mission to drive investment, trade, and job creation in Africa. We believe in trade over aid, and the business is the best way to build things and make a difference. We have three verticals in the company. The first is the Empower Africa Business Network. The second are events and trade missions. And the third is consulting and project facilitation. Before I pass on the microphone to our fantastic moderator, Hema, I'd like to share something a bit personal as part of the opening remarks of this fantastic event. Every time I hear the words women empowerment or women inclusion, I have to be honest, sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable. There shouldn't be a Women's Day, right? There shouldn't be a Women's Inclusion Month or whatnot. We're all equal, gender, race, religion, right? I grew up in a I grew up with very impactful women in my life, whether it's my mom, my two older sisters. But I feel like only after I got married and had our first child, not to mention my wife, of course, who was extremely impactful, right? MD, PhD. And it was only after we had our first kid that I got to see up close more of the complexity, the compromises and challenges and so on, and how much we need to support and enhance the efforts towards equal opportunities for all. Since we're not where we're meant to be, it's important to mark all these days and enhance all the efforts towards equal opportunities for all, of course. But it's not just a call for action. It's not just a call for action for what's right, but also an economic imperative in our collective and shared pursuit of a world where business is done better. Everything that we do at Empower Africa is done with the vision of a world where business is done better. Because through unity, diversity, and transparency, everyone becomes empowered, everybody gets a shot. So just this week, by the way, the first female president in Tanzania was sworn in. Tanzania, one of the fastest growing economies in East Africa, and it's the first woman to hold office, to hold a head of state position in East Africa. I'm honored to have been a part of the efforts of putting this event together. I want to shout out to many members in the Empower Africa team who helped make this great. Shout out to Stephanie, Caleb, Kaylee, Daniel, Kitso, Jesse, and many others. And I'd like to hand it off to our exceptional moderator, Hema, Vallabh. And to quote your LinkedIn headline, Hema, which I love, engineer turned entrepreneur turned investor, diversity specialist across the spectrum. She's the co-founder and CEO of WomHub, the founding partner at 535 Ventures. Can't wait to hear more about that, Hema, and about all your experience and what you've been working on. Please welcome Hema.
Hi, thank you so much, Shai. Thank you for the introduction and for the opening remarks. And hi, everybody. It is a little surreal over here, sitting and talking to a computer. It's nice having the little ticker on the top showing how many people are viewing, which makes me feel a little bit less alone in my room over here. I'm calling in from Johannesburg, Africa. And for me, it's actually quite special, I think, because not only is March Women's Month globally, but in South Africa today is actually a bank holiday. It's Human Rights Day. And as humans, as women, it's exactly like you said, Shai, it's about the work we do together collectively. Also as individuals is really to be able to break the inequalities, level the playing field, if you will. And that's something I've dedicated my life to. And I've been very fortunate, first as an engineer, like Shai mentioned, then starting a nonprofit, spinning out into a for-profit, a company, working with female founders, especially across the African continent. And now really grateful and honored to be able to be an investor to hopefully bring up the next generation coming after me. So still very much a journey ahead, but I'm really honored to be here. So thank you to the team at Empower Africa for inviting me to share the stage with you. Even more excited because as the topic as the topic for today's event says, extraordinary women, extraordinary entrepreneurs, and I'm in such esteemed company here, this afternoon on my side. I know we're calling from different parts of the world. But I'm really excited to introduce you to our panelists who will be sharing the stage with me, and thrilled to be in conversation with them for the next, 45 minutes or so. So with that in mind, let me start bringing them on. And let me start with the first panelist who I'll introduce is Valentina Okaru-Bisan. But since we're all going to fast become friends over here, we can call Valentina Val or Prof. OB. Val is a Nigerian and US licensed attorney. She is the CEO and founder of Afro-Cosmo Development Impact, and that is a company that advises and trains small and medium enterprises on how to formalize and be more productive in the African environment, but also diaspora trade, investments, and the development space. So Val, I'm very excited to have you join me, and welcome. And next, I will call up Wendy Singer. So Wendy has served as an executive director of Startup Nation Central since its founding back in 2013, and today leads its Jerusalem operations. Prior to immigrating to Israel, she served as a registered lobbyist in the Capitol Hill in DC, but I believe she's now based in Israel. So welcome, Wendy. Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, the next and final panelist who will be joining us is Megan McCormick. So Megan is a systems thinker and a strategist who is really passionate about designing solutions that bring real value to customers, corporations, and communities. She is currently the co-founder and CEO of Oze, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, a fintech company that equips African entrepreneurs to make data-driven decisions to both improve their business performance and access capital. So with that in mind, Megan, welcome, and I believe you're calling in from Ghana. So to the speakers, I mean, this is, as I look at my screen, I feel a little bit less lonely now, and it's a fantastic panel. So with that in mind, and just to give everybody a bit of an overview of how we're going to work is, so I will lead the conversation with Megan, Wendy, and Val, and that's just very much it, right? It's a conversation. So I think you all have such incredible backgrounds. I purposely didn't read your bios out in extensive detail. We know we live in a world where I'm sure everybody's already Googled you, hopefully. But I really wanted to get to the stuff that they can't find on Google, So I want to get to know you, what you ladies are passionate about, how we collectively are empowering entrepreneurs, empowering women, and how our work can be more meaningful for all those who are listening in. I then later will open up to the audience for Q&A. I believe you do have access to a chat function and a Q&A functionality, but I will guide the audience along later when we're able to do that. But in the meantime, if you do hear something, do pop it in the chat. We will be looking over into that. So to get us started, what I really want to just very quickly do, I think I mentioned for some of you where you are and where you're calling in from, but I think as we do have quite a global audience, if I could just do a quick icebreaker round, if I call it that, before we get into, the nitty-gritty of it. So if you could each just very quickly tell me, where are you originally from? Where are you calling in from? Did you is this where you're based, or did you land up in COVID lockdown there for some reason? And also, just to make it a little bit more fun, if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? Right? So with that in mind, I'll go according to what I see on my screen. So Megan, over to you first.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on this panel with such amazing women entrepreneurs talking about a conversation I care a lot about. I am calling in from Accra, Ghana. I'm originally American from the East Coast, Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington, D.C. And if I was I don't know if the question's the power that I want to have or the power that I have, but if either one. I would love to be able to teleport, to just pop in and out from different places. We spend a lot of time on the road here, and I would love to avoid that, but also being an entrepreneur living an ocean away from my family, it'd be nice to be able to pop home for dinner and then pop back to Ghana for work.
That certainly will be next level. I think at least something. I know nobody needed a pandemic, and virtual is not quite replacing in person, but I think it certainly has made chat like this more accessible. So, right direction. Val, over to you.
Yes, thank you. First, I know we haven't talked, so let me quickly thank Empower Africa for inviting me here, and say hello to all the distinguished guests. And I'm very pleased to be with esteemed moderator Hema and also my esteemed fellow panelists, Megan and Wendy. So quickly, you asked about where I'm from. I'm a Nigerian originally, but also an American. And I'm calling from Maryland, where I have my company registered, Afro Cosmo Development Impact LLC, Maryland. So yes, so if I'm a superhero, what would my superhero power be? Well, my superhero power, I would want it to be sort of linked to what my developmental impact. I'm a strong believer that the way forward is trade, investment, and economic development for women. Okay, so I would want to have a very, very broad developmental impact on the lives of those that are marginalized. That's what keeps me awake. I believe in a higher power than me. So if I'm a superpower, I want to use the power of that higher power, who's the creator. I'm not here to influence people on their belief systems, but I want to use that creator to make a big difference in the lives of the marginalized people, especially women in the world. And I'm grateful that I've sort of had some success in moving ahead. So I want to use that power to help others, to bring them along, not to give them a handout, but to give them a hands up, so to speak. Like the Bionic Woman, if you know the movie, The Bionic Woman, to use that hand with different tentacles and help them to survive and be more productive.
Thank you so much, Val, and I love that so much. You know, anybody who knows me knows I already believe that all women are superheroes, in our own ways, shape, and form. And I'm very excited to get talking to you more and letting the audience get to know you more, because from what I've read so far, you already are living that path. So, you know, kudos to you on the amazing work you've been doing. Wendy.
Okay, thank you, Hema. I'm honored to be here with the three of you. It's really a special opportunity. I'm just going to go right to your question. So geographically, I'm pretty well covered. Born in upstate New York, raised in Toronto, Canada, in Boston, and worked in Washington, D.C. I am calling in from Jerusalem, Israel. And I've spent a lot of time on the continent on various business and pleasure trips. Just really feel very committed to this continent. In terms of the superpower, I'm going to give a different version of what Tina gave. Mine would be to give to female teenagers anywhere in the world a sense of self-confidence, to those who need it. That would be my superpower. Wait, we seem to have lost. You're on mute, Hema? You just need to hit your unmute button.
Okay, I think Hema just dropped off. There she is.
Back on.
Okay. I couldn't seem to unmute myself there, but thank you very much. No, I think that's fantastic. And I think, you know, when we talk about confidence, there's so much we can, and I would like to delve into that. So hold that thought, Wendy, and please do bring it in as we further the conversation. I think I think of myself, you know, and today, touchwood, I'm so grateful that I'm been able to do such amazing work. But I always tell people, you know, I was the insecure teenager at the back of the classroom. I was never the kid who put up my hands or thought I was a leader. It was really only in my mid-20s that I if you will, discover the leader in me. So that's something that's very close to my heart. And I'm not necessarily of the mindset that leaders are born. I do believe, especially on the African continent, it's what we're able to be exposed to, and the work that people like us and those around us do collectively that enable that. So that really hit home when I heard you say that. So it's with that in mind, right? So now I want to really get into a little bit of again, I'm going to go around the screen, if you will, and I'd like each of you to just share a little bit about, what is that you're currently working on, whether it's a specific project, a company, or an initiative that you're working on. How does that tie, and bring in a little bit more about yourself? And I know as women, we're particularly bad at thinking of a question this way, but what is extraordinary about you? What is extraordinary about your work? And this is my invite to you is no holds barred. No, I don't need anybody thinking to underplay themselves. No modesty or room for humility over here. I really want you to shine and talk about, what's been so extraordinary in your journey, whether it's the entrepreneurial side as a woman, doing the work that you're doing, and this project or initiative or company that you're working on. So Val, this time we'll start with you.
Yes, thank you, Hema, for that question. What's so extraordinary? I want to be humble and say there's nothing extraordinary about me, even though I seem to be told that, I have 4 degrees and the whole gambit. But one thing I've found is that every step of the way in my life, every experience I had, from, get beat in the area of scholarship, everything from working in law to moving affairs, development when I worked at the World Bank, to working in M&A at the law firm, mergers, acquisitions, it all adds up to where I am now. And what I'm working on right now, as I set up my business recently, my Afro-Cosmo Development Impact LLC, Maryland, USA company, and I also teach. I've taught for over 15 years business and trade law, right? It all seems to add up, because where I am now, the work we're doing currently with my business is that we advise small and medium enterprises on how to be productive and how to formalize. And we actually train them. It's an innovative capacity building initiative that we bring to bear to help them. Actually, yesterday, my company, we co-hosted with Squire Patton Boggs of Washington, D.C., and also the Institute of Dispute Resolution in Jamaica, an event which is we're hoping to use as a building block to help the creative industry. So we work in food and entertainment industry and energy, renewable energy industry, the whole gambit, because as I mentioned earlier, I work on trade, investment, economic development, specifically helping SMEs with becoming more productive. So one of the things that we're looking at is within the, not just the food supply chain, but also in the creative industry, is moving ahead with helping women, female-owned SMEs, and also some men too, because men also are vulnerable within this COVID era, but specifically zeroing in on women-owned SMEs, helping them to formalize and to become more productive. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that during my presentation later today. It's an innovative way in which it's an interactive, organic, experiential, capacity building training process that enables them to have access to business, trade, legal knowledge, trade facilitation at the grassroots level. This is what it's all about. But we'll talk about it later and go into more detail as to what, how it works.
Great, thank you, Val.
I was going to suggest that I can go next. We can, Shai, what do you
yes, please go ahead. There's a technical issue. She's coming right back in. Go ahead, Wendy.
No, I was gonna turn it over to Megan. I have to.
Oh, Megan is here. Right, Megan.
So.
Please, Megan.
I'll go ahead. So, really, my career have been focused on issues of youth unemployment. I still luckily fall into the youth category, the 18 to 35, and my first, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Republic of Guinea. an organization called, which had as its mission and vision a youth-led movement to end unemployment in West Africa through investments in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And everything really that I've been working on since came out of that. I believe that the way that we can truly end youth unemployment on the continent and around the world is by empowering micro, small, and medium enterprises to become employers, because the majority of MSMEs in Africa don't create jobs. Country to country, it fluctuates, but it's somewhere in the 90%. And if most of your economy is made up of MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises, and the vast majority of these MSMEs don't create jobs, then of course we're going to have a massive youth unemployment crisis. And as someone who has really kind of grown up, ever since college, my peer set here is the group of people who are most at harm and most at risk from this unemployment trend. And that 11 million African youth join the job market each year, and 2/3 of them are unemployed or underemployed. So right now, what I'm working on at Ozai is trying to create a platform that solves the issues of small business stagnation, and actually to frame it more positively, which is how I like to, is to equip small business owners to use data to grow their business. And the hope is that, and what we're seeing in the data is actually that when small businesses grow, they turn around and invest the profits in job creation. So that's what we're doing at Ozai, helping businesses grow, create jobs, access capital. And it's been, youth unemployment is a huge problem, and probably I'll spend my whole lifetime working on it without getting to 100% of the solution. But it's been really exciting to see the businesses using our platform actually taking steps towards solving that problem.
Thank you so much, Megan, and thanks, Val. I caught most of yours, and somehow I got kicked off stage, but we power on. But yeah, and I think before we make some remarks, let's go over to Wendy, and then we can bring it all together.
Okay. Well, I am very fortunate to have been part of the founding team of a nonprofit organization called Startup Nation Central. We are a non-government organization that's based in Israel, and we were born in order to do one basic mission, which is to connect Israeli technology with global challenges. Now, we do that in many, many different ways, but I want to go right to your question, Hema, about what's a project I'm particularly excited about. There's actually two that are related to women and women in tech. One of them is actually a project in Embu County in Kenya that we are officially launching this Wednesday. And the idea there is to bolster the productivity of smallholder farmers by introducing innovative Israeli technologies that can help grow their crop yield. This whole project is based on another project that we did in India, and it's using the agripreneur model. And through this project, which was implemented in India, we were able to boost the productivity of 400,000 smallholder farmers. And now we're replicating that same model in Africa. So I'm very excited about it. I know that of the sort of the whole pool of agripreneurs, 20% are women, which is also a very interesting data point in terms of the number of female entrepreneurs that are coming out of Africa, which is an impressive number. There are other parts of the story that are less impressive, but the number of women entrepreneurs is to be noted. And the second thing is actually here at home in Israel, we have a chronic shortage of talent in our tech ecosystem. And it started in Central. We actually worked with a sister organization called Scale Up Velocity in order to identify the communities in Israel that are terribly underrepresented in the tech scene here. One of those communities is ultra-Orthodox women who are falling off the funnel of the stem cell pipeline way too early and really just not getting into the high-tech jobs. So we started boot camps where we do a little bit of upskilling, but mainly helping them to connect to specific high-tech opportunities, including the soft skill training. in terms of integrating them into high-tech companies with opportunities to interview and so on. So I'm just very excited about these two projects, one of which is in Kenya and one of which is here in Israel.
Thank you. So you mentioned, in your first point, just how you've been so incredibly blown away by the number of women entrepreneurs on the continent. Did you know that Africa is the only continent that has more female entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs, who are typically more experienced and show a better track record than their male counterparts or all male-led teams? And why this is so close to my heart, while we are on the did you know fact-finding thread. So it's part of why I'm raising my fund, 535 Ventures, and the name really speaks to it. So, we know if we add more women entrepreneurs to the African ecosystem, we could see up to a 5% uplift in GDP. And that's really by leveraging the 35% higher ROI that you typically see in female-led teams relative to all male-led teams. So, it's really, it's not just, I'm glad that people like you are seeing it, but the numbers don't lie. And that's, I think the more we talk about it, the more visible this becomes. The other thing that struck me as all of you were speaking, and I think I can hear, like me, and I think we're kindred spirits here, like me, I can hear the passion in your voice. You all said words like, I'm so fortunate to be doing this here, or I love what I'm doing, or I'm grateful, these are the words we use. But I also hear that as entrepreneurs, we talk about extraordinary entrepreneurs, some of the best companies are born out of frustration. When you're just so fed up, access to capital or access to opportunities, access to information. And I found a lot of that coming through as you talked about what you were doing. And I do think for me, and I'm biased for sure, as I'm sure we all are, but there's a stat that says women in the developing world spend 90 cents of every dollar earned on other: health, community, education, family. So uplifting people around them as opposed to just themselves. And this does bring me to the gender side, right? Because yes, these are blanket statements, but women do think differently, we work differently, where we work and what and why we work is different. And it's not about necessarily highlighting the differences or a comparison between men and women, but it is about acknowledging and recognizing that previously or largely marginalized demographic that makes up 50% of the population is finally now finding our voice, or not just finding our voice, but finally being given the microphone, more importantly, right? And with that in mind, and Shai made some comments in his opening remarks around International Women's Day. And much like him, I'm always like, but isn't every day International Women's Day? Shouldn't it be? But I'd love to hear your thoughts about and feel free to be as controversial as you like. This is a safe space. As we said, we're all friends here. There's some people who say, because we highlight women so much, is that a good thing? Is that making our jobs harder? I know I had certainly people when I'm an engineer by training, and there were many women who I worked with like, I don't want to be known as a woman engineer. I'm just an engineer because I'm just as good as the men. Having said that, when I have, doors slammed on me all the time, the playing field isn't level. So for you as a person, what does this mean to you around International Women's Day? But also in the work you've seen and the work you're doing, what are you seeing? Specifically on the continent, but not limited to. And let's start with Wendy this time.
Okay, Hema, I'm intrigued by the way you framed the question, and I was also intrigued by the way that Shai mentioned this in his opening comments. Like you, I tend to look at women entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs. I'm proud that they're women, and I definitely identify and I want there to be more women entrepreneurs, but I think that most of the female entrepreneurs that I know that are successful, first and foremost, see themselves as entrepreneurs, as the mindset. But if you then take the mind and put it to the side, the data that you just rolled out is on the one hand encouraging on the continent, but on the other hand, some some of the pieces around, at least I saw in this World Bank report, in terms of getting financing for women-led enterprises, and in terms of being able to scale some of these companies, it's a trickier story. So when I think about Women's Day, and I wish that the entrepreneurs would see themselves as entrepreneurs first, but I feel that policymakers and change agents really should be putting their nose to the grindstone to see what can we do to enable these women to be more successful, and what can we do to grow the pipeline. Now, I know that in part of your story, you've created a platform which increases the interventions for girls and women at every stage of the engineering pipeline. So I think it's that kind of initiative, and the kind of initiative that we're doing here in Israel. There need to be many more of those.
Great. And while we're on that train, I will come over to you, Megan and Valentina, as well. But so I think another thing, and maybe Megan and Val, please do feel free to fill in on this as well. I think as all of us are doing, and like you said, rightly so, in my organization, in the work you're doing, we spend a lot of time developing the women, which I think that's because we haven't had these opportunities before, girls and women. But there's another side of that coin where we have to start changing the environment around us. So, for example, part of my journey to become an investor is because there just simply aren't enough women at the investment decision-making tables. And, we can develop women until we're blue in the face. But until women are the ones making the decisions and the environment around us changes, we'll only have half or a quarter of the success that we could potentially have. And so, those, feel free to expand on those thoughts as well. And let's go over to you, Val.
Yes, hi. How do I view Women's Day, I think was your question. I want to remember, because I know after Wendy talked, I want to sort of make sure I'm hitting the nail on the head as to what you asked. In terms of women entrepreneurs, I think for me, Women's Day really is a day to, as you mentioned, Hema, we should always celebrate Women's Day. It shouldn't be cast aside for just a specific day. Having said that, it's actually good we have that in a way, because celebrate women that came before us, right? Women entrepreneurs that, not just in the political sphere, not just in the entrepreneurial square. Look, sphere. We just had whatchamacall, Kamala Harris, that was elected. I'm not trying to deviate from entrepreneurship, right? Because it all fits in. You know what I mean? The political sphere influences business. So, Hillary Clinton cracked the glass ceiling and Kamala Harris broke it. So, let's not forget that, when I'll be presenting, I'll be talking about how the political regulatory climate can impact upon the business climate. So in a way, we've come a long way from when women were supposed to be seen in the kitchen and not heard, right? To now when women are talking about the Me movement, even in the workplace, and women entrepreneurs are fighting for their rights all over the place. But we still have a long way to go. But let me have a caveat that as we progress as women, we shouldn't forget our men, because we don't want a situation where women become empowered and we do what the men did to us, to them, to the men. So I'm very pleased that women are progressing. We've come a very long way. We still have a long way to go. And I will be giving statistics, of course, on transboundary trade in the African region, where more than 74% of transboundary trade is done by women traders, female traders. And I'll be showing a photo of female traders. So we've come a long way. Women have also been the head of their households. And if you consider the household as a corporation, they're the decision makers. You don't have to be in a corporation where women are members of the board, which we still have a long way to go in women being members of board. They're underrepresented. But if you consider families board, corporate, which I consider, I'm a corporate lawyer, I'm a corporate professor, I teach business law, and I always tell my students, think about the household. Who makes the decision? Most oftentimes is the mother, the woman. Okay, you don't even have to have a child to make a decision. The auntie makes a decision too. The grandma, women have always been strong in different ways. Or are you talking African women that fetch water? They work in the marketplaces. They've always done that, right? And they said in Japan, there's a saying that the man is the head, but the woman is the neck. She controls the finances. She twists the husband's neck left. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to depict it in a very illustrative way. But really, we've come a long way from the time when we were meant to be seen and not heard, and not voice whatever frustrations we have, be it in the business or personal realm, to now when we're having more of a say. But like you said, every day is really Women's Day. But it's nice that we get to celebrate it. But let's not forget our men, because they too, we're equal but different, right? And we need them, whether we like it or not.
Thank you so much, Val. And you make such interesting and really hard-hitting points. Then there's actually data to back that up too. I think it's a bit outdated, and I stand to be corrected. But I think it was McKinsey who released a report about 5 years ago that said, women make up over 50% of the population, but we control over 80% of the market share, because that's where household decisions, and just buying power, even cars. The cars a household typically has more in the developed world, as decided by women. And the engineer in me, so I often talk about the design versus the user experience. And currently we're living in a world that has largely been designed by men, for obvious reasons historically. But think about them, who are the users. And I'm being a bit facetious, but I often joke and I say, we've put a man on the moon, for crying out loud, and I'm yet to find a car designed with space for my handbag. So it's
That's a good one.
It's an important point. But I think the more important point, and it's what you said around, I've dedicated my life for the better half of the last decade and a half. I've been working with girls and women specifically in the STEM, the engineering and tech space, and I'm really passionate about that. But you made a point about not forgetting our men, and more importantly, not forgetting our boys. And I think it was Gloria Steinem who said, we're starting to raise our girls a lot more like we do our boys, but few have the courage to raise our boys the way we do our girls. And I think that is so profound, because I do think, and to the comment I made earlier, when we're telling boys things like, you run like a girl, as an insult, what message are we sending to them about what it means to run like a girl? So even in our everyday narrative, is the way we communicate with boys are creating the men of the future. So I think these are really important points that tie. International Women's Day, celebrating our girls and women, is wonderful. Let's bring our boys. It doesn't have to be an either or, right? It's an and in both. So on that note, Megan, over to you.
Sure. And I loved your point around women being entrepreneurs, running the corporates of the household, because at Dare to Innovate, we were struggling to have enough women come through the pipeline. Like they were, the top 20 candidates that would rank would all be men. And we started reframing our question around what entrepreneurial experience you have, and really saying to people, entrepreneurship experience doesn't have to be running a business. If you're managing a tight budget in a household to feed many people, that's entrepreneurial experience. If you're, organizing the labor of your younger siblings to get something done, that's entrepreneurial experience. And we need to frame it in a way that women, because so much of the world takes the value out of the contributions that women make to society, right? We don't put a salary on all the extra work that women do outside of their salaried employment. You have to frame it in a way that women can also see and understand and communicate the value of everything that they're delivering. But on to the original question around Women's Day, or Women's Month, I think it's important because I think we really need to have a reason to point out and highlight how far we've come and how far we still have to go. So in my household, I have 2 brothers, and then a mom and a dad, and my mom and I are the 2 most educated people in the family. And my brothers see themselves as very, gender enlightened, or however you want to call it. But I think last year, when I was home from school, I made them all take the implicit bias test that was developed by Harvard University. And, my dad was talking a big game, like I would always promote a woman over a man, like the women would tell him, that's because the women who got to the point where you were making the decision of whether or not they should be promoted, they're better than all the men, like especially in the 80s and the 90s. And has strong bias towards man, work, women, household. So if we don't have these opportunities where we're actually putting attention and focus on the fact that women are getting 2% of venture capital, even though investing in women is the best way to make a return, then I think we'll just let the men and even the women run around all day, every day, all year saying, oh, we've come so far, like we've done good things, I'm not sexist. And so I think it is really important that we have these types of days to bring attention.
Yeah. And I think, Megan, you've just really hit the nail on the head there around implicit bias. By virtue of the name, by virtue of the term, it's implicit, so we don't know. It's not, and yes, men and women who are genuinely going out there and saying, I am doing this and I am doing that. It's the big things are certainly important, but I personally believe it's the little things that are more important, and it's often the little things that are harder. One, because they're implicit, and it's also often the things that happen in our inner circles, right? It's easy for us, and maybe I should put myself, it's easy for me to sit on a global stage and proclaim the work I'm doing to, empower and better the lives of girls and women. But do I have the same courage to call it out when it's happening in my family and the people I care most about? When they make, I come from I'm of Indian heritage. I grew up in South Africa. I'm third generation South African. So, it's all these compound factors around cultural narratives. I come from an extended family of over 18 girls and 5 boys. And yet I sometimes hear the elders in the comments they make around, there's a family gathering. Who do they ask to make the tea? And do I call that out in my own environment? So, though it's the little things that are the big things, in my opinion. So I think there's some really important remarks, and I think for those of you who don't know about it, and Megan, I'm not sure if you have the link available, but I'm sure we can get the organizers to share it as well. Please do, go take the implicit bias test that Harvard has put up. It's an open source portal. Do it for yourself. You'll be surprised. Even if you are like us, we're more woke, if I'm allowed to say that. But please, it really is an eye opener, and encourage those around you to take the test as well. I think it's a fantastic resource. So fantastic.
And I even have slight implicit associations with women in household, right? So as a female CEO who's conscious of these things, even myself, I have slight, not strong at least, but slight implicit bias towards women household.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, by nature of who we are, we're human, right? So we all, this goes back generations, eras, for instance, the beginning of time, if you will, as well. So I think for me personally, the message I like to pass is we all have implicit bias. There's no one should be made to feel guilty about that. It's the awareness around that that's in our control. So don't apologize for having the bias, but always be open to being more aware about it, because that's the only way we start moving in the right direction. So I'm going to steer the conversation in a bit of a different direction, but similar train of thought around, so I know there's different schools of thoughts around women and showcasing these things. Similarly so, especially for those on the continent who have worked here, I know there are very mixed feelings about this word empowerment. What does empowerment actually mean? Africa is a continent in particular that has a long history of aid, charity, if you will. The way the media portrays us as a continent, and especially if you think of, I was born in the 80s, I'm dating myself here, but I was born in the 80s, and I know in the early days of watching television, and even when the first time, I was quite old when I first traveled abroad, but you still had people saying things like, oh, do you have roads? Or there's this vision of what Africa is, because the way it's being portrayed, especially historically to those outside of Africa, was, that's the place you go to donate and give charity and give a handout, and that's how we're going to empower Africa. And today, when you switch on the news and the conversations we have, and I think empowerment and entrepreneurs are almost synonymous, because, you know, when I think of entrepreneurship, I think of opportunity, I think of job creation, I think of wealth creation. You know, these are words that come to my mind and that resonate with me a lot more around this term empowerment. But in your worlds, and I think all of you, in fact, come from interesting lenses because you all have worked on the continent, or are working on the continent, but you have extensive, you know, Val, you're based in the US. Wendy, you talked about your extensive background in travel, and Megan coming from the US and now living in Africa. I'd love to hear, you know, contrary to me, having been born and bred here and pretty much lived here my whole life, I'd love to hear what you think around Empowerment Africa. But if you could take the narrative on how other people, what is, if you were the media and you decided what empowering Africa meant, what would be the message you send out to the audience? And yeah, well, Val, let's start with you.
Yes, thank you for that very important question, Hema. I live in the US, but I also, of course, grew up in Africa. As you know, I grew up in Nigeria. I don't want to call it Africa as a whole. We have varied socioeconomic, cultural conditions. I worked, of course, at the World Bank, where I actually worked in South Africa too. And I'm still affiliated with the World Bank. So I work on African SMEs right now, even though I'm based in Maryland, USA. I've been in the US for close to 30 or more years. Oh my gosh, but I still travel back and forth. I know, right? But empowerment, you know, not just writing extensively in this area. I have a piece on 7 deadly sins of aid. Not to say I disagree with aid, in other words, financial aid. I believe in aid in terms of empowering Africa for humanitarian and for a short term, you know, targeted. I'm not per se Dambiza Moyo, although I wrote my piece. I knew her. She worked with me. She was a consultant when I was there at the World Bank at the time. She was there 1 year. I support aid, but I believe that, like I said, humanitarian, targeted, you know, relief, whatever there is there for Africa. But the way I view it in terms of empowerment of Africa, you didn't specify that it was specifically the women, but empowerment of Africa would require, you know, trade, investments, economic development. I view through the angle of trade and investments, right? And of course, support to women, support to youth, because there's going to be a youth bulge, right? So I'm looking specifically at self-help initiatives because I'm an attorney and a law and an economist, law, and, you know, in terms of background, right? And a business and trade professor and lawyer and practitioner. Biased, but has helped them, you know, not so much giving handouts. Sometimes you need to give some handouts to, you know, in terms of financial capital, right? Beyond just humanitarian, just as a startup, right? But basically you want to help people by giving them hands up, right? So that they can have long-term economic viability and sustainability. So equipping them, maybe giving them, you know, not just humanitarian kind of financial assistance in this case, but some kind of initial capital to start their business, and then helping them with skills, right? With training, with, if there's joint ventures with foreign counterparts in terms of technology transfer, those kind of things. But really, that's the key to development and to empowerment, because when you make people totally, it's sort of like the Chinese saying, give people fish versus teach them how to fish. I believe you need to give a little bit of fish, but teach how to fish so that they can move and run with whatever skills you've given them. Skills, and on the job too, on the job training, using them, human capital utilization is key, especially in this area of trade, investment, economic development. And I think for Africa, food, the food supply chain, very critical, you know, energy, you know, basic infrastructure, all those things, but very, very critical. Don't get me going on it because I could go on and on forever. But basically trade, investment, economic development, self-help initiatives, skill set, you know, like in my area with women, SMEs, equipping them with business, legal, policy, knowledge. Like with the AFCFTA, most female traders don't even know what their rights are. You have to know what your rights are. You have to jump on it. You know, money is critical, but non-financial capital is so critical. And that's where the trade, investment, economic development skills kick in, right? Thank you. That's a very important question. Thank you for it. I love it.
Thank you very much, Val. You know, talking on for being able to go on forever. We obviously are the same passion areas, all of us, because you know we've totally noticed that time has run away from us. So as we do wrap up the conversation, I still will come to you, Megan and Wendy. So if you could, you know, in line with that conversation, and I think that last bit is important, is what would be your parting note to people? You know, and you could bring that into a closing remark. Your thoughts about empowerment, but what is your parting note to people when they think about how they can empower the continent? And I'm glad that Valentina mentioned as well that, you know, Africa is not a country. We, you know, we speak of it as a region because, of course, it is. In a forum like this year, it's easier to do so. And you know, there will be so many of these events in the future where I'm sure we're going to break it down into, you know, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So I'm sure that, you know, the organizers are going to do amazing work when we talk about the regions. But for now, let's keep it as a continent. And yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts and your closing remarks then, Megan, and then Wendy.
So what you're doing in women, it's empowerment, also a win-win. Anything that's going to take us long-term success is where both parties are getting something out of it. So invest in women, get your return, create jobs, create innovation. That would be my closing remark.
Wonderful. And I think you're doing exactly that with OZE. So, you know, a shout out for that as well. For those of you who don't know about OZE, please Google them. Megan will send you the link as well. Amazing work being done to just enable better access to everybody, but I think women in particular, especially on the continent. And Wendy, then, you know, you have the huge privilege and no pressure, but to leave make the parting thoughts that everybody.
Okay. Well,
closing shot.
Thanks, Hema. And I'm mindful of the time, and I have to say, hard to add to what my two co-panelists just said on this topic. I'm going to go at it. At Startup Nation Central, we've really had the privilege to work with some extraordinary organizations on the continent that are doing exactly this type of work. The one that stands out is this African Leadership Network. I've had the opportunity to get to know Fred Swaniker in the last few years, and what they're doing, not just to scale and increase the impact of the African ecosystem, but also in terms of thinking about it as in building 3 million entrepreneurs to transform the landscape of African leadership. To my mind, that's very powerful. And within the African Network, I know there's this sort of sub called ALN Women. And what I loved about their mandate is they're working to seek gender inclusive outcomes, which everything about that wording to my mind was very thoughtful and important. I love with Hema, and I think this is something that I'd love to share as a universal message. Our late president, Shimon Peres, said at a conference a few years ago, what is the greatest contribution of the Jewish people to humanity? It's dissatisfaction. And I think you yourself touched upon it when you said that so many of the most successful organizations and initiatives and startups come from a problem. And so I wish you and wish Valentine and Megan and all the women that are marking this occasion with us, just keep experiencing the dissatisfaction to keep you going on to do great things.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy. And on that note, couldn't have asked for a better parting shot there. To Val, Megan, Wendy, thank you so much for your time. 45 minutes and an hour just simply wasn't enough. You know, this is the part where I'm feeling a bit about virtual, because in a normal conference we'd probably just step out the room and continue the conversation. But that's what LinkedIn and other platforms are there for. So the other thing is, during this discussion, some wonderful resources have been shared. So please do have a look at the chat and pull those in. I see some LinkedIn profiles have been shared as well. to connect with others. The whole point of networking is just that. I do apologize if we did not get to Q&A, but there will be a networking session post this year, so please do find the speakers at tables. The upside is you no longer have to stalk them in the lunch queue. Just go sit at a table with them, and you can ask them the questions. And absolutely, I think the biggest thank you goes out to the organizers. I see Shai has joined us as well. I think I know they were thinking before they started, is this a good idea, and how do we do more of these? I think the resounding conclusion post this discussion, seeing the engagement, seeing the chat, seeing the interest is an absolute yes. So thank you all for joining and being so engaged. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And yes, I think I've hopefully covered all the admin, but I'll leave that to you rather, Shai.
Yes. And also, I want to just add a thank you to Shai and to Empower Africa for just having thought to bring us all together. It was a really special opportunity.
I thank you so much.
Yes,
Wendy, Val, Hema, and Megan. I've spoken with each and every one of you individually, and it's just exceptional. And to have you all together on a panel, it was like a dream team. I really think I've actually gotten many texts that this has been by far one of the most, interesting panels that we've had thus far. So time is short, and here's what's going to happen next. We're now going to move on to the networking session, like Hema said. After that, we're going to have the presentation by Val. We're going to do that in 20 minutes, okay, at 5:25 CAT. And yeah, listen, we're going to do a follow-up event on this with a similar focus. We'll discuss with you guys further regarding specific speakers. And again, imagine the power of not just people hearing you guys, but then other people who are interested in the same focus, in the same, whether it's job creation, investments, entrepreneurship, having those conversations and meeting in person, right? The networking is extremely powerful. So again, thank you so much. We're going to move on to the networking session now. And again, Hema, thank you so much. Yeah, everyone, thanks for joining us. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Hema.